BST 2016. This is interviews, music reviews, opinions, and more. This is The Hotter Show.
What is up, everybody? We are on audio here today on episode 291 of The Hotter Show. I hope you guys are doing absolutely fantastic. Thank you so very much for tuning in and clicking that play button on today's episode of the podcast. I got a kick-ass episode for you here today that I try to every single week right here on The Hotter Show. I get to sit down with my new buddy, Matt Latour, also known as Big Slop, who is a house DJ as well as a radio personality and a podcaster. And we have a really fun chat talking about his start in radio and kind of what he's doing now with his work with two stations here in Peterborough, Freak 90.6, and then it was Oldies 96.9, I believe. I apologize if I'm getting that wrong, folks, but if you're in Peterborough and you listen to either Freak or you listen to Oldies, you've heard Matt's voice before. He is the news guy for those radio stations. So we talk about that as well as his love of the dubstep and house music genre and how he kind of got into that, as well as his company, Electronic Current, in which he has a website in which he basically helps to manage different artists, obviously himself, and as well as another artist who he works very, very, very closely with, of course, whose name is Maddie Lick. Shouts to Maddie Lick, who, may or may not have been on this podcast as well. Who knows? We're not going to say. But then, of course, also he does work under Big Slop. And if you're a fan of dubstep and house music and things like that, you're really going to enjoy his stuff. So be sure to go check it out. He also has a really cool event coming up this weekend in which they are doing a live stream. So I will have all the links for that down below. He talks about a little bit about it near the end of the episode. We also talk a little bit about wrestling, which he is a big fan of, and as well as his podcast, Jordan and Matt Rank Things. And that's a great, great podcast. So be sure to go check it out. I'll have the links for everything down below. But enough rambling. We're ready to jump into this episode. My chat with Matt Latour. Let's get into it. A little over a month ago, Peterburgers, the best hamburgers in the entire world, here in Peterborough, Ontario, where they're based out of, they were doing a little giveaway for some gift cards. It was about a week-long giveaway, and at the end of the week, they did a bunch of giveaways in the same day. So during the day, we're sitting watching them post these videos, my wonderful fiance and I go, man, we know where the one is. So we jump out and we go and we start booking it over towards where this gift certificate is. And we go to get the gift certificate, folks, and it is gone. And we are super bummed out. And as we're walking, I see out of the corner of my eye a guy sitting in his car. And this gentleman rolls down his window and very politely lets us know that, I had just beaten you guys to the gift card. And I am just, of course, secretly, I have to say I hate him because, he got the card. But a little bit after that, we ended up actually looking up on Facebook, and it turns out that first and foremost, that he's a badass DJ, and that also he works in the radio world. So, of course, he's someone I wanted to have on the show. So, ladies and gentlemen, the guy who beat me out by about a minute for the Peterburger's gift card, Matt Latour. What's up, man? How you doing?
I have not won many races in my life, but that's going to be one of about 4, and I'm gonna never forget it.
Dude, that was like the longest, most extended intro I've ever done for someone, I think, too. Like, I had to tell that story to lead you in.
I'm honored, man. I'm honored. That was a weird day. So I knew about the Peterburgers giveaway. I followed them on Facebook, but I had no idea that they were doing, I think it was 5 in that day. And I just happened to be across the street getting gas when I saw them go live hiding it, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. Just pay for my gas and walk over and get a burger gift card. And that's how it went. And then I saw you and your fiance walking, and I let you know, and then I ended up running into you guys, I think in the Peterburgers comment section.
Yes, that was it, because I believe I had commented saying that someone, because I think I had beaten you, like you were going to comment obviously and say, hey, I won. I think I commented first and was like, hey, someone got it. So then when you commented, I was like, oh, okay. We had a little couple comments back and forth, of course,
yep.
Being me, I was like, you son of a bitch.
That's just friendly competition though.
So, but Oh, of course. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, we spent the rest of the day trying to get the gift certificates and unfortunately did not receive any more. But we received one during the week, so it was all good. Big shouts to Peterburgers, man. Definitely the I'd eat there every day if I could, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I'm in the radio world. We don't make as much money as some people think, so I can't afford to eat at Peterburgers every day. But I mean, I think it was a $25 gift card. I used it that week because I just couldn't wait. I've been there before. I like to kind of frequent a little bit of everywhere. When I eat, I don't like to stick to one spot all the time, but I knew I wanted to go back to Peterburgers for sure. Definitely
so. And I mean, now they're, of course, doing, just to give them a little plug here. They are currently they've teamed up with Till Death Barbecue, and they're doing a whole bunch of new stuff. Two of the things they're doing a pulled pork burger. And let me tell you, it is fantastic. Pulled pork on the burger, a little bit of coleslaw. It is fantastic. They're also doing a little pulled pork poutine. So big shout out to Peterburgers and Till Death, just because I wanted to give them a little plug. But this is cool, man, because in this life over the last few years, anytime I come across someone, whether it is a random chance encounter like this was, or I find them on social media or whatever, and I go, you know what, this would be an interesting person to talk to. There's things I would like to know about this individual, just because, whether it's because of something that they do or they're a musician or what have you. And for you check all those boxes for me, being number one, like we mentioned, that you're in the radio world, and then also that you're a DJ. So I have never had anyone who was a DJ, whether, albeit a house music DJ or dubstep or whatever, on the show before. So obviously I want to talk about that. But first and foremost, going back, just because you've already mentioned it, how did you get started in the radio world, and what exactly is it that you do?
So it's really interesting. Looking back, obviously hindsight's 2020. Radio has been something that I always loved. Like, I used to call into, at the time it was 99.9 Mix FM in Toronto. Now it's Virgin Radio. I used to call in and request songs all the time. I wanted to be on the radio. But when I grew older, like towards the end of high school, it was never something I thought about as a career. I wanted to be, of all things, a TV cameraman. So that's what I went to school for in Niagara College. But Niagara College's program, you have to do TV, radio, and film your whole first year. Because I guess, some people changed their mind, like me. And I went in, I wanted to be a cameraman in the NHL. That was it. Like, cameraman in the NHL, that was the goal. That was the bar. You couldn't convince me otherwise. And then I talked about sports on the radio.
That's
once.
Awesome. That's hilarious. When did, I mean, to cut you off, but just when did you start, just because that's such a very distinct thing to want? Like, what age were you at when you kind of decided, like, hey, this is what I want to do? I want to be a cameraman in the NHL.
So I volunteered at Oshawa Generals games. I grew up in Oshawa. So I volunteered at Oshawa Generals games just to get community service hours when I was in high school, because you need your 40 hours to graduate. And they stuck me on camera for a game, and I was like, this is a lot of fun. And then I would PVR the game, go home and rewatch it. And then it was always just kind of this, like, need or want to always kind of make the next game better as a cameraman. So I was like, this is getting good. Like, I feel like I'm doing really well at it. I can definitely go to school for it. There's programs all over the place. And then I went to Niagara and I talked on the radio once, and I was like, oh, damn, I really like that too. So I had to make the choice, which was probably, it took me about a month to make that choice.
That's awesome. So then once you made the decision that, hey, you were going to move into the radio world, like you went to school and everything for that, correct?
Yeah, so Niagara College has a 3-year program. The first year, and I love Niagara College. I'm so happy I went there. Some great experiences. The first year you do TV, radio, and film, and then after that you kind of choose your major. So I did radio and television presentation. So being behind a microphone or in front of a camera, kind of being the guy that talks. And my big thing was I wanted to be a sportscaster, and well, much like being a TV cameraman, you couldn't convince me otherwise, right? And then I started doing other things that I really liked. And down the road now, fast forward, oh God, I guess I started school in 2014, so 7 years ago. Fast forward 7 years, and I'm a news reporter of all things. I don't cover a whole lot of sports, but every chance I get to, I will, because it's still one of my favorite things in the world.
That's awesome, and that's a very, number one, you have the voice for it, because you have a fantastic speaking voice. That was something that I catch things like that too. Like, I like to surround myself with a lot of really talented people. So whenever I hear someone who has like a really great voice, I'm like, And it just so happened that I was right. I was like, oh, like he has to be doing something with his voice, because he has such a great speaking voice.
I'm certainly not singing.
Like when I messaged you and was like, yeah. Well, I mean, there are some people that have a great speaking voice that can't sing a lick, and there are some people that have a horrible speaking voice that can sing beautifully. So it's, takes all kinds. But it's funny because, like, with, reporting, like news reporting and things of that nature, it is something that's very, like, obviously you can't just report what you want. You have to talk about everything, as much as I'm sure you'd love to just report on the, what's happening in the world of sports. You do a little bit of everything. And now you're working with, it's 96.7 oldies, and then it's Freak 90.5, correct?
Yeah, so right here in Peterborough Square, right in the basement, we're kind of hidden away underneath the mall. And it's interesting because I started my career working up in Cottage Country, Ontario, Barry's Bay, which is right near Algonquin Park. And that was in a morning news anchor role as well. But then a job opened up here because before it was Freak 90.5, it was Talk Sports Radio Extra 90.5. So I was like, oh, Talk Sports, I'm going to go do that. Like fulfill my destiny, if you will. Because I finally got to come on the radio and talk about sports. So I came here and did some news. I hosted some shows here and there. And then when COVID-19 hit, obviously there's no sports going on. Programming became a lot tougher to come up with without any sports, because you can only do so many what ifs about the pandemic before you run out of content. So we flipped, and there's a lot of other factors as well, but we flipped over to kind of alternative rewind, alternative rock, Freak 90.5. And at first, I'm not going to lie, I wasn't huge on it because my big thing was I wanted to do sports. But I mean, I learned that this job in radio and in life, obviously, you can change so many different things, and really it's just your approach to it. Like, if you come at something with an open mind, there's a really good chance you're going to enjoy it, even if you don't think you will originally.
That's very true. And I mean, that's great advice just for life in general, right? There's things that I'm sure everyone can relate to that, where there's things that you might not think you're going to enjoy, and then you do it and you're like, you know what, this isn't so bad. I actually kind of like this.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, I mean, and that was the same thing when I first got into radio back at Niagara College. Was I wanted to be a cameraman. I didn't want to talk in front of a microphone because, I mean, I spent my whole life talking to my mom about sports, and she didn't really care to listen. She was like, oh, just shut up, please. Like, I don't care about how many goals the Habs scored this season on the power play. I don't care about what this guy's doing in WWE. So I was like, I don't want to have people ignore me for the rest of my life. And then, I don't know, something about talking on the radio for me, I was like, I really like this. And that was kind of the first time I made the big jump to do something that maybe I didn't originally set out to do, kind of change my path. And I figured at the time, like, I was 18, I was like, if I'm ever going to make that jump, it's now.
Definitely so. And I mean, it's lucky that you were already in a position where, it was just a matter of kind of changing what you were doing at the school, right? Like, it's, if you had to completely go back home and regroup, it might have been a little bit trickier for you, but I'm glad that you were able to, and that you were still young enough that it wasn't like you were, in your 30s going, I really want to try and get into radio.
Yeah, and I mean, full credit to anybody that does that, because, I mean, I'd argue that that's a tougher thing to do when you're in your 30s and you want to change careers, because there's so much stigma around, especially if you have like an established job. If you're not happy, so many people won't change careers because they already have that establishment and they don't want to go through everything again. But there's nothing wrong with restarting, no matter what age you are, really.
Definitely so. It's so important in this life to be happy and do what makes you happy and focus on that. There's too many people out there that are, they're doing things in their life right now that they don't really want to do just because they kind of feel like they have to for whatever reason. Because again, like you said, there's kind of that stigma of, oh, well, I'm 35. I can't go back to school and try and start a whole new career at this point in my life. I have to just stick with this. And there's a lot to be said for, there's a friend of mine, actually, you mentioned WWE, so I know you'll appreciate this. He actually started training to be professional wrestling when he was in his 30s, which is like, that doesn't happen very often. That's very rare. And now, a couple years later, obviously, with the pandemic, obviously he can't wrestle right now, but he's been wrestling locally in Ontario for, the past couple of years since then. And I mean, it's a wonderful thing to see. And he said to me himself, he's like, there was a lot of people that said, dude, like, you are way too old to try and start being a professional wrestler, right?
Yeah. And I mean,
like, I want to do it.
Well, and that's just a testament to dedication, right? Like, no matter what you do, and obviously sometimes physically you can't do something, but if you're in good shape in your 30s and you want to be a pro wrestler, go out and do it, man. Like, why not? That's awesome. I mean, I'm a big wrestling fan in general, so I'll always encourage anyone that wants to go through tables to go through tables. But yeah, like, it's never too late to start a dream if it's something you're really committed to.
Definitely so. And I mean, that's one thing that, talking about this year, and I mean, COVID has been talked about to death and all the negativity and stuff. I try to avoid that, but one really cool thing that's been happening this year that I've seen so many people do, myself included, is a lot of people have realized with this time they've kind of had sitting at home. And some people, unfortunately, there's been a lot of stories of, mainly with musicians, where, they had tours planned for this year, they had to cancel and all that. Like, it's really easy to get things kind of taken away. So there's a lot of people that maybe at one point were afraid to try and do something, but now they're kind of like, you know what? Like, if I don't do it, I may not get the opportunity at all. If you put things off, I'll do it next year, or I'll do this in a few months. Hey, in a few months, you might be in lockdown and you can't do anything. So it's so important to just go for whatever it is you want. And I mean, there's people that I've had countless people contact me about starting podcasts, and people who are starting streaming and, things of that nature. And they always wanted to, just now they're kind of like, hey, I have no excuse now. I'm sitting at home, and why wait, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's a lot of that, especially in music. And I think it's making a lot of people be a little more creative or daring with what they're doing, because when you're in that mindset of touring all the time, and I'm just looking at it strictly from like an electronic music standpoint, when you're touring, odds are you're playing the same set most nights. But now that you have all this free time, it allows you to explore your abilities a little more and maybe make a different genre of music or a different style of music that you didn't really have time to do before because you're doing so many other things. And that can open up, I think, a lot of opportunity for a lot of artists once they find out, hey, I'm really good at this. It opens up a new kind of like section of a fan base that maybe you didn't have before. And it's something that, I mean, this pandemic, don't get me wrong, it's been terrible, but if there's any kind of positive that's come from it, I think a lot of people have discovered things that they're really passionate about. Definitely
so. I mean, there's a friend of mine that literally, he had talked about streaming forever. And it, there's a lot of people that started streaming this year. Let's be serious. That's not that odd, but when he started streaming, like, he's like, dude, like, he's like, I've put it off for so long. And he's like, now he's like, I just, like, why wait? Right. Like, just why am I putting this off? Like, I have the time. I want to do this. Let's do it. And let's see what happens. And, there's so many people that are a theme that I've been talking about a lot over the last few months on the show with people is like, a lot of people are afraid of failure, right? Like, that's something that holds a lot of people back from trying to pursue something. And that fear of failure it can be a powerful thing to stop you from going to try, and whether it's you want to start a band, or you want to, interview for a job, being a sportscaster on the radio, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people can be afraid of taking that next step or that risk because they don't want to fail. And it's like, I feel like, kind of like what you were saying, like, this pandemic, a lot of people it's made a lot of people kind of almost look inwards at themselves and be like, all right, what really truly makes me happy? What truly do I want out of this life? And, I think a lot of people they're not letting that fear kind of hold them back anymore, because they're just like, I need to do things that make me happy. And that is a really beautiful thing that we're seeing out of this pandemic right now.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that I don't want to say it's out of necessity, but I think you mentioned this earlier. People are realizing that, when the world shuts down, if you're not doing stuff that makes you happy, like, what else are you doing? And luckily, I've always kind of been in the mindset that if I like doing something, I'm going to do it. And if I don't like something, I'm not going to do it. I've had jobs where one day it just clicks and I'm like, I don't like this anymore. Like, I'm not happy here, so I'll leave. And then it's kind of been like that with a lot of different things in my life. And the pandemic, I think, for a lot of people woke up opened up their eyes to that, because they realized, like, hey, I can't do anything now. Like, what do I do to keep myself happy? And for some people, it's a struggle to find. And for some people, they find it quite naturally.
Definitely so. And I mean, being creative people in this day and age, I mean, it's great for us because, like, we, hey, if I want to sit and record a podcast or something, I can do that very, very easily. Yep. It's not a challenging thing to do. If you want to do this, hey, if you want to do the same thing, you can do that. If you want to work on getting a new mix together, you can do that. Like, it's great for creative people, but for the people out there who are maybe want to do something creative and are, for whatever reason they're holding it back, I say to them like, yo, just go for it, because it's so, if you're not happy in what you're doing, or if you're at a job and you're just miserable, and there's something else you'd rather do, like just go for it. Like it's so, you can't let, the idea of failure or that negativity hold you back for sure. And I mean, especially with what we're seeing this year, I mean, I'm ready for, the kind of the renaissance that we're going to have once, things get back to some kind of normalcy within the music industry in particular. Like I'm really excited for that, because there's going to be every show imaginable is going to be happening. And there's going to be, we're going to be seeing you out playing sets every, every other night. There's going to be people, every band's going to be playing every night. Like it's going to be ridiculous, right? Because there's been all these people who have been cooped up, not being able to perform, which is what they live for, right? So it's interesting. Like, do you think that's something that, like I know that you have done some live stream stuff as well, kind of switching gears into your kind of talking a little bit more about your music background and that. I know that you have done some live streaming stuff, but is that something like you're really excited to do, like to be able to get back in front of an actual real crowd? Yeah.
So it's funny. I've been DJing for, I don't know, 3.5, 4 years now. But I didn't start making mixes to put online until I'd say probably 2 years ago. And then even then I wasn't playing shows, because my big thing was I just DJ'd for fun. There's people that want to do this for a career. So if they want to play a show, book them, don't book me. And then one day a buddy of mine was booking his own birthday party here in Peterborough at the Gordon Best Theatre. And he said, hey, like I want you to play a set. And I said, sure. And I went up there and it was an hour-long set. And I didn't think much of it while I was playing it, because for me, it's just like I mix. I usually, when I get bored, I'll DJ, because it's something to pass the time. I can learn new stuff. But when I played that set, there was maybe 25 people there. But and this is February 2020, so about a month before the pandemic started. There's 25 people there, and the genre of dubstep I play is very aggressive. And these 25 people are all mosh pitting, like in Gordon Best Theatre, which if you've ever been there, like it's not a very big theater, and the floors are a little creaky. And just that feeling, I was like, man, this is so cool. Like I want to do this more. I want to play at Junction, like a house set. I want to play at Red Dog, because it's the Red Dog. It's iconic. And then the world shut down. So I was like, oh, like crap, what do I do now? And that's when I got into the live streaming stuff, and I've organized a few different live streams through Electronic Current, which is my website, but I've also played quite a few as a DJ. So I think the balance of kind of being an organizer and giving other people that outlet, but also, using, I guess, kind of my platform for good as well. I think that balance has been really important.
Definitely. It's important to keep that balance for sure. What kind of got you started on the path of getting into kind of like the dubstep and things of that nature? Because you have an interesting style, because, and like, we talked about this before I heard your music, but you had said to me, that you do use a lot of rock music in your dubstep. Mm-hmm. So listening to Big Slop's Slide and Slop Volume 2, which is the thing you saw. I knew I was going to butcher that. I had to read it off. I was like, Big Slop's, which you can find on SoundCloud, by the way. I highly recommend you go check it out. Which is like you said, it's your music, but then also it's a collection of some of your other friends as well. When did you kind of start getting into that music? And was that music that you always enjoyed from a young age, or did you kind of start off on a different type of music? How did that all happen?
So for me, it was, and a lot of people in North America. So dubstep has been around for, I'd say probably closer to 20 years, at least on some kind of mainstream level, but that's mainly been in the UK. And then around 2010, 2011, Skrillex started making it. And he's this guy from LA. He's making it for like a North American audience, because people in the UK hate Skrillex because I think he ruined dubstep. But really, I think he opened it up to this whole side of the world, including, a young 14-year-old Matt Latour, who at the time was like, man, like I've never heard these noises in my life. I love it. And then I was really heavy into dubstep in high school. And then I went to college and I worked for a rock radio station, and I kind of got out of it. And then just randomly one day I heard, a new song, a new dubstep song. And I was like, oh yeah, I really like this too. So I got back into it. I hosted a college radio show where I highlighted new dubstep music. And then eventually it got to a point where I was like, I just want to listen to dubstep that I want to listen to. I don't want to have to skip songs, which kind of led to me DJing, because when you're the DJ, you have control of what's in the set. So I started it kind of out of a selfish nature, DJing, because I only wanted to listen to music I wanted to hear. And then it became a thing where like I found an audience that like other people want to hear this as well. And it became a way to support friends of mine who produce music. And I'd say I probably have 15 mixes up on SoundCloud, and the latest one that you mentioned, Slip and Slop Volume 2, I think out of the 30 songs, like 20 of them are made by friends of mine. So when people listen to this, when they're freaking out about a song, I can tell my friends, like, yeah, this person likes your stuff, like find a way to connect them and make them part of your fan base.
Definitely so. And I mean, it's all connected, right? Like you mentioned with Electronic Current, which of course is your website, and, you do manage, obviously, Big Slop, and then also Laddie Mick, who is a house DJ, who mysteriously kind of you kind of have a similar vibe going, but of course he looks very different from you. So of course that's definitely an interesting thing on my end. But it's funny, man, because like with dubstep, like I was a little older, like when Skrillex kind of came around, and I mean I was that guy. When Skrillex came around, I was like, what the hell is this? Oh man. Oh, what is this noise? I wasn't a fan of it at all. Like how long, when was that? That was like
2011.
I was like in my early 20s, but I was still like, oh, what is this noise? Oh God, I worked at a music store at the time. And like, I remember, it's actually a really funny, quick story. I was standing behind the counter, like it was like a guitar music store. And this one young kid came in with a couple of his buddies, and they come in and they go, hey, we want to make dubstep. And I was like, what is dubstep? Like, I didn't know what it was. I knew nothing about it. And the kid's like, he starts playing it for me on his phone. And I mean, he's playing Skrillex songs. I don't know any Skrillex songs. I'm just like, I don't know what this is. Like what is this noise? Like I knew what, like I do enjoy like hip hop and rap and stuff. It's like, I know what a quote unquote beat is and like the sounds and stuff like that. But I was like, this is very different. Like, this is really aggressive, and like, there's a lot of drops and stuff. And they were like, yeah, like, how do we make this? I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. And he's like, well, what can I like make it on a guitar? I'm like, no, you can't make dubstep on a guitar. And I remember like that kid came in 3 or 4 times asking what instrument he needed to make dubstep. And every time I had no idea what to say to him every single time.
It's simple. Just crash a car into a pole and it makes just about the same noise. Not a kick drum underneath. But but that's the thing with dubstep is that like, and people love it because it's so different, but it's also why people don't love it. Like for me, I was always kind of gravitating towards it because when I listen to music, I want to hear something I've never heard before. Like I want to hear whether it's a new sound or like a new rhythm or even like a new synth in a dubstep song. It's like, I haven't heard that noise before. That was really cool. Give me more of that. I've heard a guy play guitar hundreds of thousands of times. And like, I'm not knocking any other genre of music. There's some fantastic music out there across the board. But for me, hearing a new sound is what got me with dubstep. And it's still to this day, like I find people that make music now, it could be like a 17-year-old from like Virginia. But they'll make like a different type of rhythm. And I'll be like, oh my God, like I love this feeling of finding something I've never heard before. And for me, like that's what's always kind of gravitated me towards dubstep.
Definitely. And that's something that as I got a little older, I appreciate a lot more now. Like I really enjoyed the stuff that you sent me, like, cause I kind of like understood that. I was like, okay, like it's very different. There's a lot of different, synth noises and stuff like that happening here. And I really learned to appreciate it. But it's funny because what got me to kind of open my eyes a little bit more to dubstep was, of course, when Korn teamed up with Skrillex. Yeah, that's what did it for me, because I was like, okay, like I like this, so then by default I like dubstep. Like I was like, I don't really understand. Like I don't like dubstep, and I still remember so many people are still mad about that. Just how dare Korn team up with Skrillex? Then like I saw that Skrillex like used to play in a metal band and stuff. And I'm like, okay, this guy's all right. Like, let me give him another chance. And now it's just like, it's funny what you were just saying about how there's sounds and rhythms and things that you have never heard before. I find that a lot with that kind of music, with, I guess, just for lack of a better term, just kind of grouping it all together, like electronic music, quote unquote. I find that a lot of some of the most unique rhythms and melodies I've ever heard are in electronic music. Like, it's really interesting to think about.
And like the way I look at it is, and like I said, I'm not knocking at anybody that plays an instrument, because like that's a talent I've never had in my life. I tried playing guitar once, somehow broke 2 strings, and it sounded like ass. So I can't play an instrument for the life of me. But with instruments, like there's a point where you can only do so much, right? Because at the same time, it's this physical thing that, you know, you can only make so many notes and whatnot. With dubstep and electronic music is you're on a computer. You have almost like limitless possibilities. It really just kind of comes down to your creativity with a lot of it. And with something like a computer and computer generated music, like there's no end to what you can make, and what you find interesting and what people have heard. And that's why I think we see so many new styles and sounds pop up so often in this genre.
Definitely. And it's funny you mentioned that, because just the other day I was speaking with a new producer friend of mine who makes beats and things of that nature. Actually, shout outs to Blossom, folks who listen to my show regularly. Just a couple of weeks ago, I did a EP showcase on Hodder, not me, Hodder, the other Hodder, the rapper Hodder, his new EP, Off My Chest. And Blossom actually is the producer that did all the beats and everything for that. I reached out to him to do an intro for this new podcast I'm working on. And he was like, okay, well, like walk me through kind of the sound you're looking for. And I sent him this big elongated thing that I was like, this makes no sense. He's not going to understand what I'm going for. And like I said, oh, like, let me work on some kind of like a skeleton sound, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, just, hey, here's kind of what I'm looking for. And he was like, no, I got it. And like 20 minutes later, he sent me, hey, what do you think of this? And I was like, this is exactly what I want. How did you do that? He's like, it's all at my fingertips. Like, he's like, I can, once you know kind of what you're looking for, he's like, it's just a matter of sounding everything out, right? Like, you know, because I was like, oh, I'd love to hear a guitar part here. I'd love to hear some strings here. I'd love to hear a bass drop here. And like, he just like added everything in. And I'm like, it really blows my mind, because I know nothing about that world. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, it really blows my mind.
And that's the same thing, I think, like dubstep production in itself. I'm not great at making my own dubstep songs. I've got tons of ideas and I don't know how to execute them, partially because my laptop can barely run solitaire without crashing, but partially because like that's just a world I've never really tried. Exactly. But like I've talked to some artists and it's different for everybody, but if they can make a sound, like if you ever heard somebody try to describe a dubstep song out loud, it sounds like they're choking. Like it's like, but these people, exactly. But like they hear a sound and they know how to make it on a computer. Not everybody can do that. And that's something that I certainly can't do. I wouldn't even know where to start. But it's one of those things where like, it's just your imagination. And you kind of talked about this producer as well. Like composing is the same thing. And it's, you know, obviously it's a little different because you're mixing in more instruments and whatnot, but putting something together like that sounds good and flows, that's just as impressive, I think.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, there's something to be said too for the world of like remixing and things of that nature, which I think that's kind of more like what you like to do, right? Like when you're doing, because again, like I said to you before, man, I know nothing about your world, and that's why I was like excited to talk to you and maybe a little bit more, because like I know nothing. Like I'll sound so ignorant sometimes, because I'm just like, I mean, just going back for a second, talking about this producer, there was something he sent me and there was like a bass part that I wasn't a huge fan of, but I couldn't figure out how to tell him what I was like, hey, I don't like this. I kept saying like, no, this bass kick or whatever. And he was like, okay. So like he kept changing the different, like he had different like drum kits and stuff. Obviously he was sampling, and like he sent me like 6 or 7 ones before I finally realized, oh wait, that's like just the bass. Like, oh, and he was like, yeah, man, that's like a bass guitar. Like, that's kind of, it's the same principle. I'm like, oh, like sometimes I'm so like, unless I'm like looking at the instrument or can hear it, it's so otherworldly to me. It's just like, it's crazy. But with like, you know, I'm a big fan in the world of like kind of like remixing and things like that. Right. Like, and that's kind of what you do, right? Like you're kind of like, you're sampling songs and mixing them together, right?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, when I played that show, I opened for my old roommate's band. They're called the Mickeys, and they're like a punk rock band, and they're like, if you ever get a chance to see those guys, Mickeys. Yeah, like those guys are badass. Like I caught their set after mine because I opened for them, but I knew I was going in playing for like a rock crowd. So I was like, if I play an hour of dubstep, like people aren't going to care. So for me, it was all about playing to the crowd. And I still played, like in the hour, I probably still played 50 dubstep drops, but I mixed it in. I played a little bit of Green Day, a little bit of A Day to Remember. I opened the whole set with Paramore, which I mean, after doing that, I'm like, I might just open every set with Paramore because that's a badass song either way.
Especially the song, with Misery.
Misery Business.
That's a great opener.
So like, I'm like, that gets people singing right away. And if you can get a crowd into it, I mean, for me, like that's the way to do it. And especially because I don't play, at least not yet, I don't play for like dubstep dedicated crowds. I play for crowds that a lot of them are hearing a dubstep set for the first time. So you have to keep them engaged. And the way to do that is to play songs that they know. Like, I've got a mashup with Kiss Me Through the Phone by Soulja Boy, which is probably 12, 13 years old now, but everybody knows that song. And then you drop it into a dubstep song, and that's that whole feeling of, oh, wow, like, I've never heard that before. Like, I've never heard this pop song from 2008. And I've never heard it dropped into whatever the hell this car crash noise is that he's playing now.
What is this noise underneath it? Like, what is going on?
Exactly. So it's all about, for me, like, you got to keep people engaged, especially if they're not huge into the genre. So for me, that's why I like the remixes. And like when I listen back to it, I'm like, I like this song too. I'll put it in there. And then I could do an hour of just straight dubstep songs. And I'm sure for a dubstep dedicated crowd, that would be fantastic. And they'd love it. But if you're playing for a crowd of people that are there to see a rock band, you have to keep them engaged somehow. So that's why I mix in a lot of those different kind of, not so much remixes because I didn't remix it myself. It's more of a mashup between two songs that I already have.
For sure. And I mean, it's having that familiar melody that people can sing along to so that they'll know, oh, hey, okay, like this is good. Like, I like this. And it kind of, like you're saying, it hooks them. And then you just, in a good way, braid them with a bunch of cool sounds. And they're like, yo, what is this? Like, this is really cool. And, hopefully they're dancing and whatever people do at a dubstep show. I have no idea.
A dubstep is mainly so there's
dancing and raving or whatever.
There's a lot of different people at dubstep shows. I mean, there's people, most of them just like to headbang because dubstep is 75 beats per minute. It's a good pace.
Makes sense.
So people like to headbang. People, as I mentioned, I played like a mashup of Let the Body Set the Floor and like a really heavy dubstep song, and people mosh. People did a mosh pit to that.
I would love to hear that. That's awesome.
I'll send it to you. Don't worry. And then but like,
please do. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
People mosh pit to that, and then. But then I've been to dubstep shows that have like a wall of death, and now it's not nearly the type of wall of death that you'd see at like a Slayer concert. But it's still something. And then some people go and they bring hula hoops and they hula hoop to the beat. Like, electronic music, for the most part, it's if you're not expressing yourself on stage, you're expressing yourself in the crowd, and people are so welcoming to so much of that. Like, there's people that have like light up gloves and they'll do tricks with the gloves, and I'm sure some of the drugs and paraphernalia that are involved with the scene probably help that. But like, I mean, that's not my world, but it's just it's a way for people to express themselves. So in a dubstep crowd, you can meet probably 20 different people that are doing 20 different things, and it all seems normal.
For sure, and that's cool. It's like there's a lot of different types of people that are coming together to enjoy the music. It's a really powerful thing. And that's what kind of has always, I guess, from afar drawn me into that world a little bit, where it's like, there's a lot of different people that like this music, and there's metalheads that love dubstep. There's people who only listen to top 40 radio that love dubstep. There's people who only listen to classic rock that might bob their head, listen to the dubstep. Like, it's so interesting to me just because there's so much similarities between, the being at a good dubstep show and being at like almost like a metal show. There's a lot of similarities I see, where you're going to have a bunch of different people from all walks of life. Some people want to mosh pit. Some people want to just stand there and headbang. You got the old dudes like me in the back who just want to sit there and drink their beer. Like, you got all different kinds of people, right?
Well, that's just it. And the perfect example is, like, look at me. I read the morning news and weather on a radio station, but on the weekend I could be in a dubstep crowd in a mosh pit. And then I could be mosh pitting with somebody who's a car salesman, and then there'll be like a 5'1" girl in there that sells perfume on the weekend or something, because so many people, like, you can't tell what kind of music somebody looks at just by looking at them at a job, unless they're wearing like band merchandise. But that's what I love about it. And I've met so many people.
And even that might be ironic, right?
Yeah. And like, I manage some artists. One of them is getting his master's in some kind of science, and he's way smarter than me by a mile. And then he's part of a duo where the other guy, like, he works at a weed company. I'm like, that's so cool. There's so many different people coming together, all for this one genre of music.
Which is awesome. And I mean, it's a beautiful thing. The fact that, music can, regardless of the type of music, is, music can bring so many different types of people together, and they can be friends and they can have a relationship when, their jobs or their life outside of music may not ever bring those people together. Right. Like it's a really beautiful thing when you think about it.
Yeah, and the online communities are just, like, it's crazy. There's a group on Facebook called Toronto Bass Community, and I've met some of my closest friends through there because you meet them on there, and just by virtue of being a DJ, I'll send them a mix. They'll like it. They'll send a mix that either they've heard and they liked or that they've made, and then we'll meet at a show, and next thing you know, it's just, like, it's a friend. It's not somebody you met on a music website. It's just somebody you talk to every day.
Definitely. It's funny because there's a lot of similarities with that and like the indie podcast world, right? Where it's like, there's people I've never actually physically met before because they live in different countries that I consider like some of my closest friends, just because we met through this crazy podcast world. And a few years later, it's like, hey, we've known each other for like 5 years, and we've, talked at least a couple times a week, every day, basically, for the last 3-4 years. It's like, wow, this is crazy to think about. Like, just, there's people that I'm fortunate enough to have in my life that I wouldn't have in my life without this podcast. So It's funny you mentioned that. Like, there's definitely a lot of similarities there.
Well, and I've got, like, as I mentioned, Electronic Current over the past year. We've done, I think we're coming up on our 6th live stream. And we get people not just from Ontario, but we've had, I think I counted the other day, like 8 artists from Australia in the last year. And of course, the time zones are whack because it could be morning for me, but it's like 11 p.m. for them. So trying to get a hold of these artists can be a challenge, but I always say, if I ever go to Australia, I got a couch to crash on. Like, or I could throw a dubstep concert down there and I know people to book because I've met these people through online communities. And the dubstep community, like, it can seem big because there's a lot of people, but at the same time, it feels like you're only 2 steps away from knowing Skrillex somehow. And that guy's like the godfather of dubstep, even though he doesn't make it anymore. So it's a very tight-knit community. It's like anything else, though. You mentioned the indie podcasting world. We were talking about the wrestling business earlier. It seems like everybody's 3 steps away from being in WWE. Or even the sports world. Everyone in the hockey world knows each other. So it's interesting how small these communities are.
For sure, man. And it's funny. Like, just, I find a lot of, like, with what you're saying, I'm hearing a lot of similarities between things I've said before, too, about the podcast world. It's funny. But one thing I want to ask you, because obviously there's a few more things I want to make sure we get to talk about before we kind of move on from the dubstep world, Matt. I have to ask, and this is kind of a tongue-in-cheek question, so nobody take it seriously. But from what I've seen of your work, you are not this kind of person. But how do you feel about the DJs that press a button and then just stand there for 20 minutes?
So there's DJs that do that. I mean, and I think, but there's also a misconception that all DJs do that. So I know personally,
absolutely,
the DJ rig I have at home, I rent it from Long and McQuaid for like $25 a month, and it's kind of a more beginner setup. And the first time I ever played on like a big club setup, which is like a $10,000 setup, like, I didn't even know how to press play because it's so complicated. So, I mean, I know, and like, there's this conception that so many DJs just press play and they flail their arms. I'm like, no, I don't know, man. DJing's tough. Like, it's really hard to do. And if you're not good at it, the crowd will notice almost immediately. And, but there's people that apparently, or allegedly, I guess, play pre-recorded sets as well. And I mean, I guess I kind of get it at a sense where, like, if you're on the road and you're playing, some people play 2 sets a day. And that's a lot of work. But at the same time, for me, at least, it feels like cheating if you're playing a pre-recorded set. I know there's people that do it, but I mean, people that actually go up there and DJ, like, it's more than just pressing play. And a lot of people, and I find it's a lot more people that are very traditional with their music sense, where if they don't see somebody shredding on a guitar, then they don't think they're actually playing an instrument. But I've always said, like, a DJ board and a DJ controller, like, that's an instrument in itself. Because like there's some setups that I don't know how to use because I have no clue how, because they're so complex and so complicated. And as you're learning that while you're playing, you have to make sure it sounds good to the crowd too.
For sure. And let me be clear too, folks. That was a more tongue-in-cheek question because I have so much respect for actual DJs, because if you put me in front of a DJ rig right now, guess what? I have no idea what I'm doing.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be able to figure that out if you gave me hours. I wouldn't be able to figure out how to do that, how to sample things. Like, yeah, I can play guitar. Cool. I would have no idea how to do that and how to read a room and know, okay, I need to, change this up. And yeah, there's, videos I've seen of people like, literally pressing a button and then just walking away. Like, just because that might happen sometimes, maybe doesn't mean everybody is doing that, for sure.
I would say that's a very small percentage.
Again, I was just
saying, like the percentage of DJs that actually just press play and walk away, like that's a very small percentage of DJs, I think, because like at least every DJ I know is not like.
Yeah, definitely so. I mean, especially when, that's this big joking misconception that's kind of always been there, where it's like, oh yeah, DJs, I think it was Family Guy that had a whole episode about it, I'm pretty sure.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
Where it was like, yeah, it was like, oh, I didn't see your fingers press that one button every hour. Like, I was like, what? Like, that's not. And I mean, it's funny because like, it's all, in good fun. But like, for me, it's like, I would not even be able to begin to do that. It's just crazy to me. So I have mad respect for it, for sure. Because I couldn't even begin to try and figure that out.
Yeah, and I'm much the same way. Like I said, I play on like a $300 rig at home, and even just learning that, like it's a whole nother world, because it's one of those things that seems so easy until you do it and until you have to do it in the moment. And especially with like mixing dubstep, you're switching songs. Depending how fast of a DJ you are, you're switching songs every 30 to 60 seconds. So, I mean, it's kind of like if you're faking it while playing dubstep, people will be able to pick up on it pretty quickly.
Yes.
Luckily, nobody I know does that.
Just like if you're lip syncing.
Exactly. It's one of those things where like you can just tell.
Mm-hmm. If you're at a festival and you see some guy, because I mean, unfortunately, there are videos like that where like the dude presses a button, then seemingly walks away and starts dancing for like 10 minutes. And I'm like, what is happening here? But like, it's the same thing. If you're at a concert seeing your favorite band play and next thing you know, the singer, stops singing a second early, but the note continues. You're like, wait a minute. Like, it's the same thing. And how many bands do that? Not as many as you'd think, probably. But, there's probably still a kind of a correlation between that and the idea of all DJs just press buttons and stand there. Like, there's probably a little bit of a correlation there, I would imagine, for sure.
And it's almost always people that don't like the music itself that think that, because you're just like, as soon as you tell yourself you don't like this genre, you're going to find different things about the genre to pick apart. And like, I flail around like an idiot when I DJ. Like, I'm a big dude, hence the name Big Slop. But I flail like a fish out of water when I'm DJing, but I'm always doing something on the DJ board too. And I've had people tell me, it's like, oh, it looks like you're not actually playing. And I'm like, well, half the time it looks like I'm having a seizure. And the other half the time I'm using the DJ board. So you tell me when I'm not playing.
Sorry, I wasn't ready for that. But yeah. And I mean, you're having fun, right? And if you miss something, maybe you're whatever, so be it. You're having fun, right? And that's, there's a lot of musicians I speak with that, like they'll be like, hey, there are times where I'm rocking out too hard and I completely mess up a note and it sounds really bad. And they're like, guess what? Welcome to live music. Like it's all the same thing, right?
Yep. And you also have to remember with something like that, and I tell this to people that I know that DJ all the time, there's like this perfectionist mindset where like, if you do a little tiny screw up, let's say you play the wrong note, or if you're DJing, your beats are off by half a second for 10 seconds. 9 out of 10 times, the only person that knows that is going to be you. Or if you play in a band, like one of the other band members might know it. So the average person listening, and the perfect example I have is like, you go to a concert, how many people there are actually stone cold sober and listening for mistakes? Probably not many. So people won't really realize that you just kind of get in your own head with that stuff. And I do it too. Like I'll be playing a song and I'll bring it in 4 bars early. And in my head, I'm like, oh, that was a bad transition. That sucks. And then I'll play that set on a stream and people won't even notice. Like it's one of those things that everyone's so obsessed with perfection that you just kind of train yourself to always strive for it, which is a good thing. But at the same time, it can be really, really self-destructive.
Oh, for sure. I mean, when you're getting inside your own head is so dangerous for anyone doing anything creative at all. Like, I think it's okay sometimes to be like, oh, you know, like after I'll do a podcast. Luckily, it hasn't happened for me lately, but like, you know, back in the day, mainly when I started, I'd be like, oh man, like I did this, I shouldn't have done that. I did this. Like, oh man, like, I should have done this better. There's something to be said for, you know, getting inside your own head too much and freaking out about stuff.
Yep.
And just kind of going, you know what, like, just have fun. Is anyone really going to notice that little slip up? Like it's so important is to make sure you're still having fun, right? Yeah.
Like, especially as like you use podcasting as an example. I did talk radio for 1.5 years, and there's times where you're going to mess up or you'll say like a statistic wrong. And obviously it sucks. And mentally, you know that you shouldn't have made that mistake, but that's how you learn down the line. And you're not going to learn unless you make those mistakes.
Definitely. Making mistakes is a part of life, and you learn a lot more from mistakes than just being perfect all the time. Right. That's, you know, I say to people who will ask me about podcasting, like, oh, like, you know, do you have any advice? And I'm like, I don't really have any advice. All I can say is I have made hundreds of mistakes and here's what they all are. Don't do this. Like that's kind of how I word my quote unquote advice now. Cause it's just like, don't do what I did. Here's many reasons why you should do things differently. Here's UI, you know? So it's funny, but kind of slowly getting ready to wrap it up here with you today. And I mean, I really appreciate the time. It's been fun kind of getting to chat with you and learn a little bit more about you here. You had mentioned to you before the fact that you actually do a podcast as well. So talk about a little bit about that. I know it's a sports podcast, so walk me through that.
Yeah. So back when we were Talk Sports Radio Extra 90.5, my boss, Jordan Mercier, funnily enough, whose Zoom account I'm using for this interview, he hosted a show called Mercier and Crew weekdays from, I think it was 3 until 6 p.m. Every day he'd have a 3-hour show. And every Friday we did a segment called Jordan and Matt Rank Stuff. No fancy name, no nothing. That's exactly what we did. And we would do usually a sports topic. Sometimes we'd branch out into entertainment, do our top 10 TV shows or something along that line. And then when we switched over to the alternative rock station and the alternative music station, we didn't do it for a bit. And we're like, man, I kind of miss just ranking stuff. Like it's so simple, but it's so much fun. So we brought it back. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere else you can get your podcasts as well. And I know last week we did, we've got a hockey one coming up. We've done our favorite movies recently. There's a lot of great, like everyone wants to always compare things, and a lot of the times it's not so much comparing what's better, it's what we like the most, which that's what I think is so important about it, because you can argue all day about, you know, I don't know, Wayne Gretzky versus Mario Lemieux, but if you can't really argue about who's your favorite because they're just your favorite.
Exactly, and that's kind of the beautiful thing about it, right? Like when you have, I just gave you guys a follow, by the way, on the old Spotify.
Oh, nice. Checking that. That's got to be like 6 now.
It's hell yeah, but buddy, maybe after a few years like me, you'll get up to 10. You know, no big deal or anything. But it's a great concept for a podcast though, like because you know obviously, you know, sports are a big topic for you guys. But like you said, I mean, I'm seeing things here. You know, just scrolling through it quickly. Top 10 favorite movie characters. You know, top 10 American hockey players. Top 10 favorite Seinfeld episodes. Top 10 all-time Survivor Series teams, which I'm downloading because I want to listen to that because I'm a huge wrestling fan. TV shows, like it's cool that you guys kind of, you don't just stick with in the world of sports as great as, you know, I mean, I'm not a sports guy even remotely. I'm not going to pretend I am. I know nothing and have no desire to know anything about it really, but I got great respect for it and everything, but I just, it's not my thing. So for me, seeing that you guys kind of branch off into different things as well, like that's exciting for me, right? Like, cause it's such a fun concept of just talking about your 10 favorite, whatever. Oh, there's 10 favorite WrestleMania matches. Going to download that too. Like there's, you know, it's funny just to have those conversations with someone.
Yeah, and I think keeping the topics like with a wide range, that's important because, and I'll fully admit, there's some topics we do that, for me, like we've done, one of them was top 10 favorite NFL wildcard games. I started watching the NFL like 3 years ago, so I had to kind of, do a lot of research for that one, but you can find an episode that, it's the type of podcast where you're not going to listen to every episode because odds are you're not big into, wrestling, movies, football, basketball, hockey, like everything at once. So you kind of pick and choose what you want to listen to. And that's the important part, is just making it accessible to everybody. Because one week you might not care about your favorite Survivor Series teams, but the next week, I want to hear who your favorite movie character is.
For sure. And then, there'll be people like me who it's like, hey, I don't really care about movies or sports, but if you want to talk about your favorite, your top 10 favorites, your top 10 favorite times that someone performed a body slam, cool. I'm for that. It's just like, I was so stupid. Oh my gosh. It's just, I mean, I'm a huge wrestling fan. So obviously, that's fun for me, but it's cool that you can kind of have that wide net, so to speak, right? And that's kind of what I sort of try to do here too. I want to have a bunch of different people on for interviews, so I'm not just always I did do a lot of musicians and music talk. That's kind of mostly my forte. And there was a long period of time where I only had punk and metal musicians on the show, which is great, and that's kind of more my bread and butter. But then it was well, man, after a while, what if people aren't a fan of pop music, of punk music or metal music? What if they don't like that? Hey, here's a random pro wrestler. Oh, that's kind of cool. Hey, here's a DJ. Hey, here's my mom. You never know, right? It's just, you never know what's gonna get people hooked on. And I think the format of what you guys are doing is cool. And I mean, I'm excited because I was kind of waiting, because I knew you had a podcast and I was kind of waiting to speak with you to then go check it out. So I'm really excited to go check it out. And first off, here are your 10 favorite WrestleMania matches. You think you can give me one as a sneak peek?
I'm not going to give you number one because that would ruin the whole premise of the podcast.
Of course. Yeah.
One of the ones that ranks quite highly for me is Owen Hart versus Bret Hart. I think it was the opening match of, WrestleMania 10, maybe 13. Bret Hart and Stone Cold is on there as well.
10.
I think one of the greatest technical matches of all time. So some of the older stuff,
was 13. So you're a big wrestling fan. You're not just
So I got
that
into
tells
it.
me what kind of wrestling fan you are, that Owen Hart and Bret Hart.
Well, I got into it in 2004, which was WrestleMania 20. Because for me, I was 8 years old in 2004. So I was like, oh, this is awesome. I love this. And then I go back and rewatch that WrestleMania as an adult. I'm like, oh, this kind of stunk. Brock Lesnar and Goldberg stink. But as a kid, I was like, oh, they're huge. They're superheroes. So, I mean, I've gone back.
They're big guys and they're hitting each other.
Exactly. And the WWE Network has helped so much with going back and learning about these older matches that so many people speak highly of. So that's why a lot of my top 10 list is more of just matches I never saw live. It's matches that I've gone back and rewatched and appreciated that way.
For sure. Have you ever had a chance to check out any live wrestling or anything like that? Or is it kind of just all been watching it on TV?
So I did, when I was a kid, I didn't really do much. But as I got older, I've been to 2 WWE Raws in Toronto, in 2010 and 2014. In 2016, I went to an NXT TakeOver show at the Air Canada Centre. I went to a No Surrender pay-per-view in Oshawa, I think it was. That was awesome. It was just so cool to see it in Oshawa being a TNA pay-per-view. And then a few indie shows here and there.
That's actually awesome.
Yeah, I've frequented a few Smash Wrestling shows here and there. I've always wanted to go to a WrestleMania or a Royal Rumble, but just obviously I've never been able to put together the money. But like I said, I'm young. I got plenty of time to figure that part out.
For sure. We'll have to link up and go to a Chinlock Wrestling show, which is one of my favorite promotions based out of Kingston.
Deal. I'm absolutely
You'll like them. It's good. It's good stuff.
Canadian wrestling has so much talent, and I mean, this is a whole other podcast, but there's so much Canadian talent.
Of course, yeah.
Even if you just look at TNA, WWE, and AEW, there's so much great Canadian talent. The guy he holds half the championships in the world. It's Kenny Omega, and he's a Canadian guy. And then you look at, I was watching SmackDown the other night, and there's a bunch of Canadians on that show. And then, Impact, they've got Cody Deaner, who's a great Canadian wrestler. They've got, what's his name? Is it James Storm? He's a great Canadian. So there's so many great Canadian wrestlers throughout the different promotions that you never know who you're going to see at a Canadian wrestling show because they could be huge in 5 years.
Exactly. And I mean, that's something that's crazy. Like, just speaking on like that, like the Dark Order, Stu Grayson, you know, he was at a Chinlock show. I think it was 2 years ago.
Oh, really?
3 years ago. Maybe it was a little longer than that. And like him and Evil Uno, like they had worked with the guys before. And like, so when they got on AEW, it was like this, they were like so proud because it's like, man, like they worked so hard. Like it's so awesome to see that happen for them.
Yep.
Because again, they're Canadian boys too. So it's like, that was so cool to see. And I mean, there's tons of Canadian. Well, I'll have to have you on again just to talk wrestling because I was kind of saving that for the end. I'm like, we'll have to tease and we'll have to have you back on to. We'll have to try and do it in person and have a brewski and talk wrestling or something.
I am so down. And it's funny you mentioned, you know, you see these guys in small venues. I saw at the time Kevin Steen and El Generico in Oshawa with like
nice
75 other people at the Legion, and those two guys fought at WrestleMania last year, you know, down at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa Bay. So it's so cool to see that, how it grows, and these Canadian guys are talented, man. But like you said, that's a conversation for another time and a few more drinks.
Definitely so, man. Well, it's been fun getting to chat with you and kind of getting to know you. Thank you so much for taking the time and, you know, kind of talking a little bit about your life. I know we jumped around a lot, but I knew that was kind of going to be our conversation because there was a lot of things I wanted to speak about. So before we go real quick, if the people want to check you out, where can they find you? And also, I want to make sure that we give you a second to plug if there's anything coming up for Electronic Current that you want to talk about.
Yeah, so if you want to find my music, you can do that at SoundCloud. Just type in Electronic Current. You'll find all my mixes. You'll also find all the guest mixes that Electronic Current has held over the past 4 years. We highlight artists really from all over. My personal stuff on Instagram and Twitter, it's just at Matty Big Slop, MattyBigslop. Facebook, if you want to hit me up on Facebook, I don't post there much, but I mean, I share some funny memes sometimes. Matthew Latour on there. Electronic Current, we've got a bunch of stuff in the works. We did a big fundraiser here in Peterborough last summer for the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center. We're currently working on a second local fundraiser that we haven't announced yet, so I can't say too much about that. But next weekend, May 14th, 15th, and 16th, we're holding the Trident Virtual Music Fest, which is in support of some Indigenous groups here in Ontario. We've got a lineup of, I'd say, closer to 40 artists for that one, raising money from, I think, 6 different countries in Europe and Australia and North America. So all kinds of great talent there. You can find all the information as well on our social media pages. Like I said, Matty Big Slop or just Electronic Current Music on different social media sites.
Awesome. We'll be sure to share that event as well. And anything coming up, hit me up and we'll be sure to share it up. And it's been great talking to you, man. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Hey, man, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I don't get to, like I said, my whole life growing up was my mom, like, kind of ignoring me talking about dubstep and hockey and sports and everything. So it's nice to actually have somebody listen to it.
Well, I'll be happy to listen anytime, brother.
Thanks, man.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. Listen to The Hotter Show right now. Are you in a band? Maybe you're a business owner of some kind, a performer, maybe a pro wrestler, an event promoter, an athlete, or maybe you're just an everyday person who needs some photo editing done. You need a great graphic design guy, and have I ever got the hookup for you? My man and close personal friend, Mr. Jason Reese from J Bird Digital Arts. Whether you need logos, t-shirts, stickers, tickets, business cards, banners, menu, brochures, flyers, posters, Facebook banner videos, door hangers, photo editing and restoration, print ads, lyric video editing, signs, notepads, window clings, letterhead, bookmarks, programs, magnets, greeting cards, calendars, rack cards, invitations, envelopes, pens. Jason will work with you to develop a style that is unique to you and that tells everybody just how special your business, event, or you personally are, and you will stand out from the crowd. On top of the fact that he does offer free delivery between Cobourg, Ontario and Kingston, Ontario, message him today right now for a free quote. That's right, a free quote. Tell him about your idea. You got something outside the box, he will make it happen. With great rates and service, you cannot go wrong. I've used Jason literally for everything over the past 3.5 years, and I cannot say enough good things about the man himself and his work. So contact him today on the web at jaybirddigitalarts.com or on social media under Jaybird Digital Arts. That's JAYBIRD digitalarts.com. You can also email him at jaybird.digital.arts@gmail.com. And always keep in mind, that his business is successful when your business looks good. All right, gang, there you have it. My chat with Matt Latour, aka Big Slop, or Matty Big Slop Latour, as I'm going to call him now, because that's what his graphics said. I thought that was so cool. Like, he sounded like a wrestler. I like that. Forgot to mention that during the episode to him. But big shouts again to Matt. Thank you so much for coming on, my man. And be sure to check out the links down below in the description of this episode, however you're listening, and I will have the link to that live stream coming up this weekend. As you guys are hearing this on Thursday or Friday, check it out this weekend. It's going to be awesome. You're going to get some great music, and it's for a wonderful cause. So be sure to go check it out again through the links in the description of this podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you are a new listener of The Harder Show, I thank you so very much for listening in, and especially still listening right now. It means the world to me. I have some tons of great content over the last 5 years. You know, I've had some wonderful interviews with some great guests, albeit musicians or other podcasters, content creators, just interesting people. And I'm always branching and I'm always trying new things. I actually just set up an interview with someone who I'm really excited about because they are very left field for me. That's all I'm going to say. It's very left field for me to talk to this person. And it's going to be really cool because she has a really cool story. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. I have a lot of great interviews coming up too that I just did this past weekend. So I have them in the bank. So there'll be no more weeks of me not having content, hopefully, going forward. That's the plan. So be sure to keep an eye out for all that. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you have not yet, regardless of how you are listening. If you are listening in on the Apple Podcast app, thank you so very much for that. It would mean the world to me if you would take a second to leave a rating for The Harder Show. It helps me a lot with the podcast rankings and helps people to find The Harder Show. I've been doing this podcast for 5 years, almost 300 episodes. I do it for the love of it. I'm not looking to get famous or anything or make money off this podcast or anything. I do it for the love of it. But either way, it still does help. The more people that listen to this podcast and check out this podcast just makes things better for your boy here. So if you would like to leave a rating, it would really mean the world to me. And of course, be sure to follow The Harder Show. We have Facebook and Instagram and Twitter technically, but I don't use it because I hate Twitter. So don't worry about that. But if you'd like to contact me anytime for anything at all, maybe you want to come on the show, promote something, or you want to come on and talk about your cats, whatever it is, homie, I will have you on to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. Hit me up anytime at thehardershow@gmail.com. And with that, I'm going to sign off here today. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time on The Harder Show. Take it easy, guys.